I'm going to make a quotation via the Coalition Against Gun Violence, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, my apologies. A quotation from Jerad Miller, who was one half of a couple who yesterday committed a spree shooting in a pizzeria in Las Vegas. They killed 2 police officers and a civilian who tried to protect others before killing themselves. This is a post this guy made on his Facebook page from January the 1st, 2013. This is a declaration to all Americans. If you don't agree with and hold dear the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, then you need to self-deport yourself to some place where people like you can congregate. China or Mexico will do fine. Their population doesn't have guns. See how they live happy and peacefully? Go ahead. Go. Ah, you don't want to? Why not? Oh, I see. The governments like to kill their own people. They like to force you into work camps and kill your second child. They like to censor the internet and the news. So leave if you don't like it here, and quit trying to turn America into those other corrupt countries. We are already on our way to tyranny, and your corrupt evil ass needs to leave this country before you incite another civil war. You're a traitor to this nation and its people who hold the rights dear to them and deserve a traitor's death. If you do not wish to be hung from light posts because of your opinion on the Second Amendment, you need to leave. God gave us these rights, and if you try to take them away, we will send you to Him to discuss where you fucked up. Well, there's reports circulating. I'm going to scrutinise this in a second, but there's reports circulating that this couple had white supremacist paraphernalia. I don't know that for sure. There's a lot of whenever spree shootings happen, there's always sort of immediate 24, 48 hour ultra analysis of the shooter's character, and very, very often they fall into similar categories. Very delusional, very paranoid people who have insurrectionist mentalities. Usually some sort of paranoid notion that the world's out to get them, especially this notion of the government. Okay, so I want to scrutinise a bit of what he came out with there. Firstly, he quotes China. I can't speak so much about Mexico because I'm not as familiar with it, but I do know a bit about China, and it's not a perfect country. It does have totalitarian aspects, that's true. It certainly does censor the internet, again, true. So he's not wrong on those points. The one-child policy, well, it's liberalised a little bit, if that's the right word. It's moderated a bit in recent years, toned down a bit. It's not true that Chinese citizens are not allowed to own guns. It's certainly a hell of a lot stricter than the United States, but there are actually shooting ranges in China. There is shooting as a sport in China. There are hunters in China. So I think he's confusing China with North Korea. China's an authoritarian state, but it's very rare I would say this, but it's not as bad as he thinks it is. Clearly he hasn't been there, I have, and it's Chinese people are not slaves. They're not. It's a country that has many problems, but it's not. Anyway, regardless of that, the fact that he is using guns as the number one issue shows what sort of mentality this person has. Obviously, Jerad Miller was a gun fetishist. And let's be quite clear about it. A guy like this doesn't give a shit about human rights in China. So let's not pretend that he does. And actually, this is something I often hear from gun fetishists. They often talk about well, if there's common sense gun control, then we'll end up as a dictatorship. But they utterly ignore the fact that democratic countries also have tough gun controls. An example I would give would be my own country. I'm from the UK. Now, this is not a dictatorship. We're not a perfect society, but we're not a dictatorship. How can I say that? We have free internet. Here I am uploading a video to YouTube. There's no censorship. I can challenge my government. I can protest. I can sign petitions. So we're not a dictatorship. We have tough gun laws. And I have news for you, to all the gun fetishists out there. These are not laws imposed by the government. Well, they are laws, but I want to make it very clear that most people in Britain have no desire to see this country end up like America. You know, I find it amusing when the gun lobby uses a few radicals from the Countryside Alliance to try and make out that the British want guns. Most British people do not want guns. We do not want to see the situation in America where you have spree shootings every single week. We have had, I believe, 3 spree shootings, mass killings, in something like 20 years. The 3 I can think of is Hungerford, Dunblane and West Cumbria. Northern Ireland's a bit different, but in mainland Britain, those are the 3 sole cases of mass spree shootings. Compare that to America, where you have it not only every year, but seemingly every week. Now, people will say America's a bigger population. That's true. But even if you look at it in proportionate terms, there's no comparison. No comparison. Something like 15,000 plus people murdered and injured every single year in America from gun violence. The figure for homicides in Britain from gun violence is less than 100. Less than 100. And actually what they need to be aware of, gun apologists, is that in this country gun crime is actually considered offences like owning a firearm. That's a gun crime. So when they say things like, look at the true British statistics, the gun crime actually isn't just about gun offences, it's about that, well, actually what I'm trying to say is offences taken to board, for example, illegally owning a firearm. So that's an important point to consider. But less than 100 homicides a year. Anyway, I'm just using my country as an example because this is a democracy like America, and when gun fetishists use dictatorships or authoritarian countries to try and make a point, that falls flat. And it isn't just Britain. Japan is another example. Japan's a democratic country that also has very low gun violence rates, even lower than Britain, and also has tough gun laws. And there's other examples in Europe and in other democratic countries, so the argument just falls flat. Australia is yet another example, a democratic country, tough gun laws. They haven't had a mass shooting since, I believe it was Hobart in 1996. Pretty much all of the US gun lobby's arguments fall flat. And by gun lobby, I'm not talking about gun owners. Let me be very clear about that. I say this on all these videos. I have no problem with responsible gun owners. I really, really don't. But looking at the other points he made there, this guy was openly calling for violence against those who didn't agree with him. He's talking for gun control advocates to be lynched, basically. And he's openly advocating violence against gun control advocates. And what we saw yesterday, he went through with it. Well, actually, he just took out, this is the thing about these people. It's not like they pick and choose their victims. He didn't know the opinions of those police officers. He didn't know the opinion. For all he knew, the civilian he killed could have agreed with some of his views. But the point I'm making here is that right now, as I make this video, I know there will be more Jerad Millers out there, and that's scary. It's tragic and it's scary, because right now America is being polluted by these absolute scumbags. And the most perverse thing about their argument is they actually believe they're some sort of liberators. They believe they are people fighting oppression. If you want to give an example of someone fighting oppression, you can find many examples around the world. But for gun fetishists to come out and claim that their misinterpretation, actually, of the Second Amendment somehow makes them liberators of justice and freedom is beyond perverse. And I'm sure the Founding Fathers would be turning in their graves if they knew what was being done in their name. And sadly, there's going to be more and more cases like this until America really starts to take two words seriously: gun control, and starts to stand up to these thugs. I believe it can start by having legislation against the open carry cult. And I've made my views on open carry pretty clear. As far as I'm concerned, no responsible gun owner would feel the need to brandish their weapon in a furniture store, or a supermarket, or a bowling alley, or any other place where there is blatantly no need for it. I mean, these people they have a siege mentality. They have, and when you're dealing with that sort of deranged mentality, and people like that have firearms, it's quite frankly unnerving. Speaking quite plainly, I don't consider myself a timid person, but I would be reluctant to go to the United States right now as a tourist, because I think the situation has got so bad, especially in some states, that it's out of control. And that's not to disrespect those decent and brave Americans who are trying to do something about this. And it's not a case, by the way, that the gun nuts are the majority. If anything, they're a very vocal minority. The problem is they are a very dangerous vocal minority, as we saw yesterday in Las Vegas, as we saw the week before in Santa Barbara. These people are always present, and it's not going to end, because until America starts to endorse common sense, and until American legislators start to stand up to these thugs, then it's not going to change. Of course they'll whinge about their freedom being taken away, but their perverse misinterpretation of the Second Amendment, point one, and their fetish for guns is actually literally costing American lives. Now, people will say I'm a foreigner, why am I, and they'll try to portray me as anti-American. If anything, I'm very pro-American. And I will quote my countryman Piers Morgan: I also want to see more Americans live. I cannot comprehend the pain and suffering that these families are going through every single time there's a mass shooting in America. And it seems to be every single week now. And that's not even an exaggeration. It seems to be whenever I hear news about the United States these days, it is about a mass shooting. And it is just so tragic, because it's unnecessary. I honestly believe that responsible gun owners would have no desire to brandish their weapons in public. I can accept the argument, for example, of someone who has a gun in their home for protection, especially if they live in a neighbourhood that has high crime. I can completely understand that. But I cannot understand the logic of someone who would feel the need to carry an automatic firearm through a supermarket to prove a point. That sort of mentality I can't even begin to understand. And I think most level-headed people would also have difficulty trying to understand that. But the problem is here, we're not dealing with sane people. We're dealing with deeply paranoid people who they're willing to carry out the threats. That's why they need to be taken seriously, because as we've seen with this guy, Jerad Miller, they are willing to carry out violence to make their point. And contrary to however much they delude themselves, this isn't violence for liberty, to free America. They're killing fellow civilians. It's not like they're in a war and they're, killing an army, like they're fighting in. These are people who are killing their fellow American citizens and trying to make the perverse argument that they're they're liberators. I mean, this guy talks about treason. If anyone's a traitor, it's gun nuts like him. And I just think it's a tragic situation, but I quoted that to try and show the sort of mentality that is so prevalent among these people, that is so prevalent among the gun nuts of America. I'm not talking about gun owners, I'm talking about gun nuts. If you're a gun owner, please don't think this is against you. And just a point about that, they stir up this propaganda that Obama's going to take away their weapons. Well, Obama is well into his second term. 5 years in office now, well over 5 years. Did he take away guns in 2009? No. Did he take away guns in 2010? No. Did he take away guns in 2011? No. 12? No. 13? No. President Obama has no intention of taking away any guns. But I do believe that American politicians, and to be fair, there are those out there who are doing something about it, but far too many American politicians, I believe, are allowing themselves to be intimidated by the gun lobby. And the NRA isn't even the worst. In fact, the NRA has criticised the open carry movement, which just demonstrates how extreme this has got. It's like Satan rebuking sin. It's like they've unleashed this virus, and now they're trying to rein it in, but they've reaped what they sowed. And the NRA has blood on its hands for basically unleashing these nutters into society. And to mental health advocates, I apologise for that sort of language, but I'm very angry. And I do believe they're deranged, so I'm not sure if it's... Anyway, I'll leave it there, but I think it's very important that people really think about the sort of mentality that I've just quoted. Because right now there will be others in the United States planning something very similar, and I think that is utterly tragic. The United States is a great country and it really deserves better than this. Gun fetishists can thumb me down if they want, I don't care. I'm just making this to support those common sense, rational and brave Americans who are trying to do something about this problem. Because I have such respect for the work that they are doing. It's necessary. This is because it's a tragic situation. And it's happening every damn week. And it's just... It's a situation... Hillary Clinton was completely right. It's getting out of control here. And it's just... It's tragic.